Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Think Sacred podcast. I am Zach, and I am joined here by my father, Phil. So, it's been a very interesting week. Obviously, we had an incredible, historic event happen on Wednesday.
Incredible in a bad way.
Yeah. I'm using the word incredible in its appropriate context. That it's a unbelievable event.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so it's really interesting. Just for a quick minute, I want to talk about it, and then from there we'll just kind of go into our normal stuff. But it was really interesting because we actually talked about Charlie Kirk on our first episode. And it's also really interesting because, we just started, and, there's only a few times in life where, you have a moment like this where it's oddly relatable somehow, even though what we're doing is wildly different than what he did or anything like that. It was weird that the first thing we were doing was, in our very first episode, is talking about, people that go out and speak about their faith and speak about their truths and try to spread their message or their word and everything. And he was one of those people that were out there, preaching what he believed to be the truth. And so, it's wildly, I don't know, it's almost unbelievable. I've felt really, really like sad and upset and distraught over the event. And then at the same time, though, I don't know how to react to it. You know what I mean? It seems so wild. I don't know. What are your feelings? And
we talked about him, and it was just kind of in a probably a interesting context. But what was interesting is the last episode that we had, you said, hey, next time I want to talk about freedom. It's real important to you.
Yeah.
And then what does Charlie Kirk have on his shirt? Freedom. On his shirt. That's what he had on his shirt as he's with the crowd. And and with this, I don't, this podcast is kind of is your thing, so I'm not trying to usurp anything over you.
I think it's our thing. Well, the whole point is it's us having our conversations.
It is, and I think, well, maybe not, but anyway, this was never intended to be a political podcast whatsoever, right?
Oh no,
you know what I mean?
It's more theological and philosophical in nature.
Yeah, so hopefully we can keep it that way, because I don't want events like this to make it turn into something that we never intended it to turn into, because just because it is just of the format and the fact that there's so many people out there, and there's so many people out there that are already political in nature, which is fine. I don't see that as a bad thing per se, but in one of the first podcasts I actually mentioned, and it was just a brief comment, and it was about how the church, I don't think that I said they should be apolitical, but in the past I used to think that the church should be kind of in the political arena and pushing their congregates to be in the political arena. I mentioned that I shifted away from that based on Scripture, and it's not that churches shouldn't be, that people should or shouldn't be in the political arena. It's not even about that at all. It's about what does it mean to be a Christian? That's one thing, and then what is the sole purpose, right? Or what is the purpose? There's a few purposes, but what is the purpose of a pastor, right? of the person that is we have the good shepherd Jesus, but they are shepherding the flock while on earth right now. What is their job according to the Bible? Is it to be political? No. But at the same time, this event that happened, we can actually not be political, but we can say it was a horrible event that actually happened, right? The person that did it, it sounds like they might have caught him. I don't know, but the person that did it, it's no one else's fault but the person that pulled the trigger. Let's just say that, right? It was an evil event. There's evil on the earth, right? And if you think about Charlie Kirk or Charlie Kirk, and this is an example, right? He was out there. All he was doing was engaging in dialogue and getting people, especially college-age people, who are prone to believe in anything that is thrown out at them, to rethink what they've been taught and make sure that they have a sound foundation in what they believe, right? So that's one thing. So Charlie Kirk was partly political, but if you read his posts, and I guess I didn't realize this because as we talked about, I don't really watch Charlie Kirk. I like what he has to say. That's kind of what I talked about in one of the podcasts. But,
yeah.
But I like what he has to say. I really don't watch him too much. But at the same time, as I'm looking at some of the stuff out there about Charlie Kirk right now, he was first and foremost a Christian, right?
Oh, very, very strong. There was one, after the shooting happened, my feed was just filled with tons of his little conversations. There's one that he has with a dude that's actually wearing like a Satan t-shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and Charlie is professing to him, basically Christianity, why Jesus is king, and why Jesus is his savior, and he goes through the whole entirety, or the basics of like what Christianity is, like basically preaching to this kid, So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
So people have ideology. So Charlie's out there. Think about this. Charlie's out there talking, right, to people in dialogue, right, and then and he is nonviolent in everything he does. Some people say he has violent speech or hate speech. I don't even really understand what hate speech is. I mean, when it comes down to it, I know what people say hate speech is, but the thing is, why is and whether you agree with him or not, let me just say it this way. Why, if someone says something that you disagree with, why do we go and why do we go to the basis of it saying that it is hate speech? Just because you disagree and may vehemently disagree with someone who says something, and again, this is not a political statement. This is just about us professing what we believe. Why is it hate speech, right? Think about that. That's about this. I mean, it's really about the stupidest way to try to stop an argument because you don't want to dialogue with someone, right? Yeah. And this whole show is about dialogue and how we come to actually reason through things, especially, for me, the Bible and my faith, you a little bit more on the philosophical side, but it's how we come to conclusions. And my son and I, I think it's episode 4 and 5 or 3 or 4, somewhere in there. 3 and 4. There were we had some dialogue where some people would have said it was heated dialogue, right? Yeah. But the thing is that we're still sitting across from each other and we're still engaging in conversation, and he doesn't hate me and I don't hate him. You know what I mean? and hate speech is just it's really a garbage. It's really just a garbage topic, right? Yeah, because it's not even a thing, right? So just people get hurt because if someone says something to them. I'm not saying that people can't get hurt when someone actually says something to an individual. I definitely been hurt by words. I get that, right? But hate speech isn't when someone actually says, "Hey, this is true," and you believe something else, and I'm trying to tell you why what I'm saying is true, and I'm trying to have a conversation with you, that is not hate speech. And there is absolutely no reason to do violence against someone that is just trying to dialogue with people that if you think about it, he's out there because he loves those individuals, and that is his shtick, right? That is his thing that he is really good and capable of doing. Everyone has a gift, and use our gifts. Now, one other thing I do want to say, I don't mean to be taking up this whole thing, Zach.
That's all right.
But and then I'll let you have the mic. I'll just sit here quiet for a bit. But do understand that in the context of some of the past podcasts that we had, it's really that everyone has. Think about this. Everyone has their own gift, and God isn't holding Charlie Kirk up at higher because he's more visible and more articulate and basically a lot smarter than most people actually out there than he is a housewife who's taking care of kids, right?
Yeah.
God's not in God's economy. If both are doing his will, then both are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I am not Charlie Kirk, and I am not and my wife isn't Charlie Kirk, and my wife isn't me, and I'm not my wife, and I'm not you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone has their own, and we have to be comfortable in what God has for us as individuals. And as much as I appreciate Charlie Kirk, as much as I appreciate all these other people out there that do things in the name of the Lord, just focus on the fact that what Paul says, we are a body, right? Christians are a body, and everyone has their own unique gifts. Okay, so just think of it that way. The other thing I do want to say, just one more thing.
Oh,
and I know
one more thing.
I'm sorry.
No,
and I know I again, this is not political, but I was it really, really made me feel good. I just can't really put my finger on it. That the administration right now, and I don't know who did it, but they took his body on Air Force 2, and they took his family with them. I can't even remember who it was, but anyway, the administration actually did the right thing for Kirk and his family. And the speech that Trump had, I have no clue if Trump's a Christian, right? There's people that argue both ways on that.
Yeah.
But he actually had a really, really good speech about Charlie Kirk, about where he is, and about the fact that we need to uphold and pray for his family.
Yeah.
That's perfectly appropriate for anyone to say.
Yeah.
And it was great for a leader to come and say that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, this isn't supposed to be political.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. No, I'm just kidding. No.
You got me there.
I have too much to say, but anyway, I'm going to give you the mic.
No, I mean, like you said, this isn't a political podcast. This is a theological and philosophical discussion of ideas. But the idea that we wanted to do today, and which we will do, is the idea of freedom, and how prominent and how strange, you know what I mean, that he happened to be wearing a freedom shirt, you know what I mean, and that was one of the things he believed in. He believed in freedom of speech, freedom, of religion, those type of things, and yeah, it's quite strange. Like I said, for me, it's very mind churning. When I went to bed that night on Wednesday night, man, my head was like uncontrollable. I couldn't control my thoughts at all. They were just everywhere.
I think Mom was the same way, and I didn't even, when I first heard it happened, I actually got a text from Mom, and I got a text from someone else. And I absolutely, for me, I don't even want to go there. I don't want to watch the videos. I don't want. Well,
I haven't watched the video either.
I don't even know if I will watch it. But,
no, I won't. But I've seen enough violence in my life to watch it.
But what was awesome is, I mean, I'm not saying anything's awesome of this, but like you said, and I actually alluded to that video started coming up in our feeds, right?
Yeah.
About just Charlie Kirk and his engagement with people.
Oh yeah, it's funny. So when I'm on my own, I watch a lot of gaming videos. I watch a lot of like joke videos. I watch a lot of other people that aren't necessary. Like maybe once in a while they'll touch on politics and everything like that, but they're pretty far removed from politics for the most part. And everybody has come out of the woodworks. These people that usually just talk about video games have come out to say a few things, here and there where they feel it necessary that they should say something, which is wild. You know what I mean? I mean, there's one guy that I watch. He's in Australia, and he's kind of he posts like potty humor stuff, and he's kind of a little more. He kind of makes fun of strange and interesting people and stuff like that. And he's not always political. He's more like making fun of people that maybe even if they are political and everything like this. But he had a super serious just video where he's just like, this is so wrong, so dirty, so just like it just like. And then he's a guy from Australia. He doesn't live here in America. He's not an American. You know what I mean? And he's sitting there. He's saying it felt dirty to him. So just imagine, how it feels to some of us. You know what I mean? Fellow brothers in Christ and
and people that are Americans. Yeah. So I'm gonna say one other thing. I'm not even gonna say one other thing because if I talk, I talk.
Right.
But it's it's interesting.
Suffice it to say. It is a very prominent thing that happened, and it is very relevant to us because we're putting ourselves out on the internet the same way he did, and we're trying to find our truths and speak them as well. And so it's a hard thing to grapple with. And like I said, my mind is kind of scattered at the moment.
Yeah.
So
when I heard it, two kind of emotional words. I was pissed and I was angry, and that times 100, right? That's where I was. But another thing I find of interest in a real bad way, but it's something that I think needs to be said, is that again, Charlie Kirk is out there, and people are saying it. Some people are saying it's hate speech what he actually did, right? And some people are glad of what happened, which is horrific,
crazy.
Right?
You talk about people going to hell, man.
But
there are some.
But he went out there, and the hardest thing to do is actually say, hey, what I believe is totally different than what you believe, and your life is gonna lead to destruction, right? And I have information for you about life. So he has love for the people, even though he wasn't telling the people what they wanted to hear, right? Love for the people, and yet some people interpreted that as he hates those people. And that's the reason he went to the campuses. That is crazy.
It's really interesting, and
that's upside down, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you've talked about it's an interesting saying of yours, which I've heard you say many, many times. It's like just because you become a Christian doesn't mean your life is going to get better. Right, and actually, in that speech I was telling you, where he's talking to the guy wearing the Satan T-shirt, he actually said, he says, when you become a Christian, your life does get better. And I thought about that in a weird way, and it's not that you don't have problems in real life when you're a Christian, because life is still life and everything, and you have to go through it the same way that everybody else does. It's not that problems don't occur, but it does make your life better in the fact that you are better equipped to handle when tough situations come up. You have a stronger mindset, and that in turn does lead to a better life. So in some ways, you could argue that being a Christian does improve your life.
Yeah, so it is kind of a two-sided thing. Becoming a Christian may mean that some things are taken away from you because you're a Christian, especially in certain countries, right? Luckily, and maybe we're going to touch upon this, I'm not sure, but we have freedom at least right now in the country that we live in, right?
Yeah.
So that's on the one hand, but there's other countries out there. When you become a Christian, your life, on the one hand, may be extremely hard, much harder, because they have no belief in that Christian God, and they basically want to squash it very quickly at the level of the government rather than just individual people, right? So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, and I mentioned this verse too, and I think it's a verse taken out of context. The verse says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? Paul actually, the whole context of that is Paul learning how to be content whether he has plenty or whether he is in want, or in other words, shipwrecked and starved and all these other things that we know that he went through, right?
Yeah.
But how do you become content in all of those things? Christianity is how you can become content no matter how the seas turn against you in life.
Yeah, no matter what you come across. Yeah, you have that inner peace. We've talked about that there's an inner peace that you get, which is true happiness. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a surface level happiness. It's a much deeper enjoyment of basically life, and you start to appreciate it and understand that life is, sacred, and this is a very special moment that we go through as humans, living, this time, and growing and eventually becoming who we're supposed to be. I don't know. Anyways, so that was just the intro. Okay, what I want to start doing now on these on our podcast, on our episodes, is because we got quite a few more subscribers now. That basically over this last week we got a lot more. We got a few comments and things like that, and so I'd like to open up every time by basically saying like what we're doing, which we went over basically in that intro as we're talking about the situation. But I want to tell people, okay, so like what we're going to do here today is we're going to have a discussion. Me and Phil are both fairly
opinionated. No.
Well, but we both have a lot of stuff we agree on. And
yeah.
We both are definitely, Trinitarian Christ believers. You know what I mean? And then there are other parts, of theology and philosophy where we have a little bit of a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, I tend towards more of like there's a reason that this world has the elements that it has, such as like survival and everything, and I think those are important and they mean something. And then you look even deeper into maybe those stuff aren't important or matter at all. You know what I mean? I don't know. Is that right? I don't know how you would describe your viewpoints on survivability and the material world.
Yeah, I don't even know how I would actually right now. So probably no
well,
right now.
When we do have our little disagreements, I think that's usually the stem of it, or is somewhere around there. Like I look around the world and I see how the animal kingdom works, and I usually I believe that there's like just a truth in it somewhere. Like God made it that way, and He did it on purpose, and therefore we can learn something from it. You know what I mean? Whereas opposed to, I think there are a lot of Christians who say like this world, as soon as it's thrown away, as soon as you move on to the to the afterlife and everything, this whole world and the way that it works and operates is basically it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like none of that part mattered, and what really mattered is deeper, much deeper.
Yeah, I mean, what you're proposing, I'm not quite sure what I believe on that. Actually, if I was just to say something off the cuff, I would say that that there are things that I do believe that there are things out there that God just puts out there just because it's awesome. Like. I mean, for sure. and that may be the only reason, right? And then there's other things as people study these, and here's an example, right? Silly example. I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head. flowers, right?
Yeah.
And flowers and the stem of the flowers and the way that bees and all the pollinators, the bees and the butterflies and the different insects that pollinate other plants from the flower, just I mean it's just crazy. And just the flower itself, even if they didn't need pollinators, right? They're just amazing looking, some of these flowers. So maybe sometimes it's just that, but also within the creation, people study the fact that things are interlinked, and maybe that's a way that maybe that's a good way of looking at it. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but to me, it's the beauty. Other people are going to look at it as a scientist, and they're going to say, "Wow, how do these things happen, and how do these things interlink?" Right?
It's funny. It's funny. One of the aspects I believe of God is that He's ultra efficient. So I think He can do both. He can have something that's really incredibly beautiful and a piece of art, but it also serves a purpose maybe within our world. Like you mentioned flowers and everything. Well, flowers are really important to the ecosystem, you know what I mean? And then those insects are really important to the ecosystem because other animals eat them, and that's how you get bigger animals that serve a further purpose. You know what I mean? It's like the circle of life type stuff.
I'm telling you, it is. I mean, and I'm talking flowers on the one hand, and then the other thing in my head is, we talked about this briefly, is even the moon. The necessity of the moon out there. That's a good one. And the tides that it causes, and the necessity of that for ocean life. You know what I mean? It's just. Yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So I don't pretend to know this stuff, but I am in awe of it nonetheless.
So we have 4 comments now from we have 4 different comments on our videos from last few days. So I want to get into them real quick or just respond to them. Well, the first one, there's not much to it, but he's actually thanking you. This is from Espresso Jack. He says, "This helped my deconstruction so much. Thank you." And he's referring specifically to the short where you talk about how the Calvary Chapel people read through the Bible in order. Would you like to respond to Espresso Jack?
No, I mean, thank you for the comment. And basically, at that point in time, I was talking about how to, in general, it's good to actually read from the beginning to the end if you're going to actually take the book, because you're forced to actually look at things in context, and you're forced to deal with the text at hand. So that's it. Yeah.
I mean, growing up, like I said, we went. You had always taken me to Calvary Chapels, and that's how I was used to it. Is the pastor goes through the book one Sunday, one verse at a time. You know what I mean? He starts at the beginning and he goes through to the second, third, fourth, all the way until the book's finished. That's how they did it. So that's that one. The second one is when you're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. You had actually in the video you had said that some of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found were New Testament. So the comment from Sky Magnet is the Dead Sea Scrolls did not contain anything from the New Testament.
Yeah, I think.
Can you clarify?
No, I think they're absolutely right. I was convoluting 2 different things. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the main thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the main example that people use is the passage of Isaiah 53, I think is what it is. Chapter 53, which back then there were no chapters, actually that was put in later. But I think that was the main one where they said, hey, there's 1,000 years difference between what we had previously versus now the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they were accurate to the T, right? So in other words, the scribes were very serious in terms of making sure that these things were written down and copied accurately, and we didn't lose a beat in these things. So I do apologize for actually saying that. That was a mistake on my part.
Yeah, you were mixing 2 things up in your head, right? As it came out, happens all the time to me. So there we go. Now I have 2. So those 2 are for you basically, and then I have 2 on my video where I'm talking, which is funny. It only has 25 views. But I got 2 comments on it.
25 views. Yeah. Wow. We need to have T-shirts and mugs now.
No, so there's actually it's when I'm talking about debating atheists, right?
Yeah.
So one thing is, I was specifically talking about the atheists that I debate. And I'm not saying, that every atheist can't determine that there are some good things in the Bible. Okay, so that's what this first comment was from Blastermaster80. Atheists are consistent in how they view religious claims and properly place the burden of proof. And saying we can't see how it's good storytelling sounds like a subjective opinion. It's certainly storytelling. So I would say to BM80 here is that if you can tell the difference that it is a good story, then I would say you are not the type of atheist that I usually argue with. The type that I usually argue with are I'm sorry, what was that guy's name again? I'm blanking.
Dawkins? Are you talking
Dawkins?
about?
Yeah, Dawkins,
Okay,
exactly.
Okay. All right.
So if Dawkins has actually answered this question, because some people have asked him that. Some people have straight up asked him, well, I mean, is it at least good storytelling? And then Dawkins has just straight up said, no, it's nothing. Like if you are an atheist who is a Dawkins style atheist, then, well, clearly you are not to the person that made the comment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are not a Dawkins style atheist. You are some other style of an atheist.
Yeah, they're right.
I'm sorry. I don't know how else to say it.
That's all right.
Usually the ones that I argue with are Dawkins style atheists that just they don't think there is anything good about the Bible at all. So that's the difference there. And so hopefully that's a little bit of a clarification for you.
Yeah.
So the next question was on the same video from Grofili, however you say that.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you looking at any other mythological storytelling? This is actually really interesting. I actually have a lot of mythological books. I have an entire book of Chinese mythology, Norse mythology, Native American mythology, Irish mythology. I have a lot of them, and actually I studied Greek mythology in depth when I was in high school, middle school. I mean, Mom introduced us to Greek mythology like really young age. I mean, I remember I did a play in like 4th or 5th grade where I was the boat keeper that ferries the people across the river to the land of the dead, right? So
I missed that play.
you don't remember that?
No.
Yeah, I was in a. Yeah,
I remember your Huck Finn one and your.
Oh yeah, that was much older. That was like that was late high school on the Huck Finn one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually really, really like other mythologies, and I think other mythologies have just an incredible amount of really interesting things that can definitely be considered truths, and some of them dive deep into the psyche of humankind. Especially when you look at like the Norse mythology one, that stuff is wild. I mean, that stuff is crazy. Now, here's the difference, though, between these things. Oh, well, then another thing is the Native American stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the Native American stuff has some of that like historical aspect to them as well. They tell stories like the flood, stories that are very similar to the flood, and so it kind of matches with the Bible. And in that case, I take some of those stories and I kind of look at them kind of like, how could they possibly maybe be connected, you know what I mean, or something like that, or could there be a deeper historical truth here as well? Most of those other ones, though, the Chinese mythology, the Norse mythology, a lot of those are stories that are meant to be analogistic.
So meant to be taken as?
Yeah, they're talking metaphysically, and here's the difference with the Bible. The Bible has stories that are apocalyptic. They have stories that are analogistic. And then they have stories that are historical, right? And so it's you got to appropriately read when you read through them to see what is, what we're reading. When we talk about reading everything in context, context is king, right? And the thing about the Bible is there's just so much of it, especially in the Old Testament, that is just straight up historical stuff. It reads like a history book. When I read the Bible, I'm not reading, a story or a mythological storybook. I'm reading a historical book, because the places, the places that are in like the North mythology, those places don't exist. They just don't. They're not, they're not going to a land, where there's a specific city that is in real life. Whereas in the Bible, that's what they go. They're in Jerusalem. They're in, the Middle East. They're in Israel. They're in Egypt. These are places that actually exist. And so it's a historical writing. Like I said, the same thing kind of with that Native American stuff. There's a good chunk of it that is just analogistic, but then there is a good chunk of it that you kind of look at and you're kind of like, that might be historical. I'm not for sure. And maybe it's a little bit of tall tale like stuff. I mean, even in America, we have our own tall tales like Paul Bunyan and stuff like that as well. And so when you think of it in that context, or who's the guy that made the railroad tracks, where he'd take the hammer and he'd just slam it down and make the railroad track or something like that.
I don't know, John A. Appleseed. No, this guy.
Oh yeah, well that was another one.
I'm joking. I don't know.
Or see, even when you think about like Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was a real person.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure we mythologicize. We add a little bit to his story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We make him a little bigger than he was, and I love the Davy Crockett stuff. I wish they made more stuff about Davy Crockett, man.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is, I mean, the difference is so when you're reading any book, right? You're looking at it as it is written, right? If it's mythology, then it's mythology, right? And you understand it as such, right? If you read the Bible, and we talked about this a bit ago, do we take the Bible literally? Yes, but what does that mean? If we're reading Revelation and it's very apocalyptic, then we're going to read it as apocalyptic literature, and we're going to understand, and we're going to try to understand the symbols and meanings. And we may have to go back to the Old Testament as to and extrapolate what they really mean. So, but if we're reading the book of John, right, and we're reading the life of Jesus, or especially the book of Luke, where he mentions very specific dates, and he mentions very specific people, or in this year of the reign of so and he mentions people, and those people. None of them have been found to be inaccurate. What people say is that, hey, I don't see any evidence for this person, like Pontius Pilate. We talked about that, right?
Yeah.
But now we know that he was a real person, and he was the governor of that area that Luke mentioned. So we read things as written. We read Psalms as we read this literally, but we read Psalms as poetry, or the way it's intended. We read Proverbs as these sayings, and sayings that have meanings of life, I guess is the best way to think of Proverbs, right? We read the book of Kings as historical, right? So it's just, I mean, you read the book as it is intended. And then whether or not the Bible is, some people say it is mythological, well, then you're going to have to argue against the historicity of those people, places, and things that have been proven to be true.
Yeah. See, so an interesting, it's like we do this in fiction. When we read fiction, you'll have a book, say like the Cthulhu mythology, right? Mm-hmm. Like those books are obviously completely science fiction, right? And so you read them as science fiction, and
that's the way it was intended, right?
That's the way that's right. That's the way it's intended.
Yeah.
Then you read another book like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is meant to be, it's meant to be an exploration of certain ideas, and one of them being the responsibility that a creator has to his creation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's why it's a wild book, man. It is a wild. Frankenstein is so different than everybody realizes, because everybody
Okay.
has this Hollywood picture of the monster going, you know what I mean? But he's not like that at all. In the
Yeah.
book, he's like eloquently spoken, you know, he speaks, he says exactly how he feels about the current situation and what he wants. He says, this is what I want. I want you to make me a wife, you know what I mean? And
I'm glad you read this and explain this to me, because I won't read it, but I like hearing about it.
yeah, well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
the concept that most people have of some of these things are like, oh, Frankenstein's just a horror book. It's the same thing. It's basically what some people do with the Bible is they look at the Bible and they're like, oh, it's just a book of good stories. You know what I mean? It's like, read it, and it's a little bit deeper than that. You know what I mean?
There's some bad stories in there too, but but some crazy stories that basically when you start reading it and getting into some of the stuff, it is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So those are those. So that's addressing all the comments for now. Yeah. So thanks guys that did comment, and we'll do this every time. Every time if we have any comments, you know, after we do our intro, we'll address the comments and respond to them, and then we'll get into the actual topic of the video, which it's now been, how long have we been recording? We've been recording for 40 minutes. And
40 minutes?
We haven't even started.
Oh, we don't have
about
time.
freedom.
It's time to shut this thing down.
I do got to take a quick break real quick. Let's take a quick break. And then
and then I'm sorry, what are you going to start with?
we're going to talk about freedom.
Freedom,
about
okay,
freedom
that's
of
what I
religion,
thought.
freedom of speech, and then we're going to go from there.
And I might have some passages too. Is that okay?
Okay, sounds
All
good.
right.
All right, and we're back. So, freedom, man, it's a heavy topic. It's pretty crazy because reading through the Bible myself, now they talk about a type of freedom. They use the word freedom, but they're usually referring to something like we were talking about, that inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually an inner type of freedom. They're usually talking about the freedom you have through Christ, right? Not saying that you aren't, you know, free to do whatever you want here on earth, or free from slavery, let's say. But they do talk about a freedom in that sense. Now, on the other hand, see, we had talked on that last episode. We had mentioned the founding fathers, and you had said that there was a pastor that had said, well, what they did was very sinful, you know, and you kind of echoed that, right? As you kind of think they were absolutely sinful as well.
Well, and I wouldn't say absolutely. I wouldn't say absolutely sinful. I don't think that's it. But if you're talking about like the Tea Party, and basically if you think about George Washington, he was fighting for the British at the time, right? You know what I mean? And then he turned against them. He and other people basically said we're here for a reason. They sent us here for a reason, and now basically, I don't even, I'm not, how do I put it? He ended up turning on the same people, right? He did. George Washington did.
Yeah.
We hold him up as the father of the nation. And I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying that, if you think about history, he ended up fighting against the people that he was supporting years earlier, right? Why did he do that? And I'm not here to argue whether what he did was justified or not. I guess that's not my point. It was more specific to say that when this pastor was talking about the revolution, right? Think about this.
Yeah.
When the pastor was, I think he was specifically talking about the revolution, right? And he was trying to say, wait, in Romans it says that we need to obey government authority. And if you think about the government authority back then, when Paul wrote that was a horrible government authority, but he's saying that we need to obey it. Yeah. So as a pastor, he was basically just saying, I know this is a tough one for you, right?
We're about to get into it.
I'm just saying he was.
No. Go ahead.
He was just trying to express as a pastor, right?
Yeah.
That you could argue that was not that they didn't act righteous in what they were doing, right? That's all I was saying. And I was just saying he may have a point, you know. He may actually have a point, because I want to say we have a great nation. I want to say that George Washington was a great founding father. I want to say Thomas Jefferson may have been a deist and not a Christian, right? Really, I mean, there's a really good argument to be made about that, right? But there were a lot of, things in the past that basically said in order to even hold office, you have to hold to the tenets of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
They had that at the time.
That was before our country was founded, when it was still just the colonies.
Yeah.
The colonies had that. They had a thing where in order to be a citizen of the colony, you had to basically sign some papers saying that you believed in God.
Yeah, and so so there's that on the one hand, and then there's the revolution on the other hand, right? And then and could one argue on both sides of it? I would say, yeah. I mean, the deeper you get in the history, the more you realize, I think, that life is messy. This is what I would say, is that I love the country we live in. I do, right? But life is absolutely messy when it comes to how people accomplish different things here on Earth, right? Mm. Period, right? We look at the path that someone carved out, and we say, wow, they got from here at point A to B, and we give them accolades for that. But then when we start looking at it, because we're upholding a person, we don't want to say, hey, the path that they took really wasn't a really good path, right? Or there were maybe some flaws in the path that they took that maybe harm people along the way, but whatever the case may be. I'm just saying that basically this country that we live in, awesome, but we could argue that basically some of the things that they did in the past, especially when they went against the government that they were supposed to be supporting, it could be looked at as that was unbiblical. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
now those are fighting words.
So I mean, is there a time to rebel against your government? Is there a time to specifically do, like something that they say is against the law, and then you're going to absolutely do the opposite?
That is a really good question, because I've thought about that.
Do you want some examples?
Well,
I've got some examples.
Yeah, in a bit. I guess let me answer it broadly, and there may be some more things, right? So in when we're looking at biblical examples, when did people actually rebel against the government? Right? It's unrighteous killing at times. There may have been stuff like that. I cannot preach my faith. I cannot preach Jesus Christ as risen, right? So that is definitely something that I think we would say, when God has spoken, we're not going to listen to the government on a couple things, right? But I think as Christians, sometimes we use that. And I'm going to find that verse in Acts where Peter actually says something. I got to find it, but I think Christians sometimes overuse that text. I want to get into it, but I would say there's probably some very specific examples, but I think it's less, honestly, than what Christians say. They want to go against the government in all cases, right? Just because they don't agree with it. We just have to be careful.
Well, I think you should absolutely. I think it's your I think I'd said this before. It is your duty. It is your duty as a human and as a person from the United States of America. It's you have a obligation to exercise your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion, because if you do not exercise those things will be taken away from you. If you let them fall to the wayside, and I see this all the time with those police videos. I tell you, I watch police videos all the time because my best friend still is he's still a police officer, and I used to be a police officer, and I watch as new police officers or there are the videos of police officers that overstep their bounds and they think it's okay because they've gotten away with it so many times, whereas someone doesn't fight back. Or you get these commenters that will say, oh, just do what the police officer tells you to do and you'll be fine, right? Well, the police officer is violating your rights. He's specifically doing things that are against the law, but since he got you to do them without fighting back or arguing, nothing's going to happen of it. The judge is going to look at it and say, oh, well, you gave him his license, you know what I mean? But then, of course, if you fight back against that, then you're in trouble with the government too. So it's like, you have freedoms, exercise those freedoms, or those freedoms will be taken away from you. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You were looking up
I get what you're saying. I mean, it's one thing to say I get what someone is saying. It's another thing, mom thinks that when I say that I'm in agreement with her. so let me be clear. I'm not, I'm not quite in full agreement with what you're saying. Or I guess I'm going to have some other things to say that maybe we can talk through, right? Okay. But it's so here's one thing that Peter actually says, and then I'm going to maybe contradict this with something else that he says, right?
Okay.
He says, this is in 1 Peter, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution. And then Paul talks about obeying government. So we might talk about that. Every government institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. We know that governments don't always do that, but this is, for this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people, right? Now, it's not to say how they're going to behave against you. It just says how you should behave, period.
How poignant, how appropriate of a message to say right now at the moment, because once again we were talking about Charlie Kirk, right? That's literally exactly what he was doing. That's crazy right there. But isn't that an exercise in a freedom of speech?
Hold on.
Keep going.
Let me just read this. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover up for evil, which is a great message.
Yeah.
But living as servants of God. Then it says, honor everyone, love brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. So do not use it as a cover up for evil. So, so when we say, it's interesting because in our nation, we say we're the most free nation on earth. I would argue that we were. I'm not sure if we are still today, but hopefully as Christians, we're using that freedom and we're saying, hey, we have freedom. Therefore we're going to use that freedom to put forth the message of Christ in the freedom that we have without fear of repercussion, or too much fear of repercussion, I should say. Right. But then, I want to find the other one in Acts in a bit, but let's just talk about this. But if you think about the gospel itself, the gospel transcends culture, right? So how do you take what we have here as freedom to be able to profess Christianity, right? And how do we take our freedom here? Sometimes we take it for granted, I would say, and you probably would agree there.
Yeah.
But if you think about other cultures, especially think of North Korea, right? Think of Sudan. Think of China. China, I mean, that's a massive country, and we think it's pretty free. There's underground churches in China because they cannot, because they try to profess. I think they try to profess either humanism or atheism, the government, and they suppress churches from promoting Christ. And sometimes it's very hard to get people to even have just the word of God. Just free thought there. So
I think they're anti-atheist as well.
Maybe they're.
I think they believe in Buddhism and Taoism or something like that.
Yeah,
they push forth their own religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they are anti-atheist because they're the ones who come up with those. They dig up dinosaur bones that have like cells in them still, like that, and they'll put that forth as basically fighting against evolution because they don't believe in evolution.
That's an interesting dichotomy. It really, really is. If you think about it, which I don't want to head down that rabbit hole. Right now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
we'd be here forever.
Yeah,
we'd have to get up. We'd have to get the computer out, start researching everything, and see what.
But if you're thinking about freedom, we ought to if we're as Christians, we ought to respect authority. This is what the Bible says. We ought to respect authority, but at the same time, if we have freedom here, we actually should exercise that freedom as a way to promote the gospel of Christ. Now, how do you say the gospel transcends society? How do you promote Christ in a society that isn't free and people can get put in prison and people can get beheaded for their faith in Christ? They're not going to. Well, I don't think I don't know really of any other religion that people actually get squashed, right? In terms of being put in prison, being beheaded, being tortured for their faith, like they do Christianity, which is nuts, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that in other societies when it says, respect authority and all this other stuff, when in fact, in another nation,
Well, even then, they were being persecuted, right? The original.
They were at the time he wrote it. They were. Yeah, exactly. Good point. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
crazy. Well, see, here's one thing, and I'm gonna strengthen your argument real quick.
Yeah,
I got another one. Yeah. Actually, you got Daniel in the lion's den, and you got Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego when they're thrown into the fire, right? Basically, they were breaking the law by not worshiping the God that the government had told them they had to worship.
Bingo. So there are instances, exactly, very specific.
And they take those people, and those people the government takes them and throws them into the fire, right? And then they're saved by God, obviously, at that point in time. And but the same thing with Daniel. It's all Daniel didn't fight back. He didn't fight back. He didn't try to fight them at all. Instead, he let them throw him into the lion's den. And then in the lion's den, he survived. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. I mean, he actually was. If you read Daniel, he was very respectful of the government. But there are lines that can be crossed when it comes to God's law versus human law. You know what I mean? And the question you have is kind of, you didn't ask it quite like that, but it is, what are those things, right? One of them, again, it's worshiping Jesus Christ, putting Jesus Christ forth. In the Old Testament, they didn't have Jesus Christ, but it's worshiping Yahweh, right? So Daniel went back and he continued to open his window and worship God, right?
Yep.
And they said, oh, he's worshiping the God. He's worshiping his God, and therefore they're going to punish him for worshiping his God, right?
Yep.
So there are things we can say, hey, the government's going to do these things. We're not going to argue against it, but there are certain things where we can say, hey, we need to oppose the government in these instances. So let me get into Acts in just a bit. So go ahead.
Good. Oh,
you find. I gotta find this passage. It's gonna drive me nuts because
I was kind of saving my biggest example, right? I was kind of holding on to it. It was gonna be.
Do you want to hold on to it?
I mean, no. I mean, if you, it'll be all right. I want you to think about the Nuremberg trials. We decided, not as a country, but as the whole world, right? We all decided that you have to go against your government at certain times. That is your duty. That if you go with your government, you as an individual are as guilty as the country, right? So during the Nuremberg trials, right, what they did is they brought forth people that weren't Nazis, but were German, national people that had done things that the Nazis had told them to do. So the Nazis said to, maybe a local police officer said, hey, you go out and you execute this person, right? So what the Nuremberg trials, what we all decided, and it's like the foundations of our current government, our current Western, even world, the way that the world thinks, you know what I mean? This is where the Geneva Convention comes in as well. It's like you have to oppose those people. It's your duty to oppose those people. It's your duty to oppose the Nazis. When the Nazis come, and even if they got a gun against your back and they sit there and they say, hey, you're going to shoot this innocent person,
Mm-hmm.
you say, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to shoot that innocent person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally get what you're saying. Now, I'm trying to think of instances in the Bible where it says, okay, there is a time to oppose the government, and it is against. We actually talked about this in one of the podcasts but anyway, instances where, right?
Yeah.
Where the government says, I want you to do something evil to someone who is innocent, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so to me and to you, it's totally obvious in the Nuremberg trials that, that if we exercise our authority as our authority that we're given, right, against people who are absolutely innocent, should we go against the government? I would say absolutely, but I'm trying to think of a precedent in the Bible. You know what I mean? Where it says that. I'm not saying it's not there. I just can't think of one right now.
Yeah.
But it is evident. It's almost like self-evident that there are certain things where it's like, okay, respect authority. It's there for a purpose. God actually institutes. If you think about it, God actually institutes, it says in the Old Testament, kings, right? Now, again, I don't want to get political, but think about this nation when certain presidents in recent past have won the presidency or put in office, and some people say basically it wasn't a true election and all this other stuff. They said it on both sides, so let's be honest about the whole thing, right? But it's interesting that once that person, is sworn in as president of the U.S., right? Uh-huh. And we could say this of any is sworn in as president of the U.S. Doesn't matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It will almost from God, again, from God's economy. I would say it doesn't even matter how they got there. God allowed it to happen, and we have to respect that. How hard is that? Right?
Well, no, but then
how hard is that? You know what I mean?
Then you're getting into into the idea of free will again. It's like,
well, I'm just saying. Well, no, I'm getting into the opposite of free will. You mean because God has instituted?
Yeah. It is exactly.
Yeah,
God's
sovereignty over free will.
Yeah. God, is things happen because God wants them to happen, and it doesn't matter what you want.
Well, yeah. So I mean, so how do you as a Christian? Again, I'm trying not apolitical. I'm trying to stay that way, but it's just an example of how do we act? How do we behave as a Christian when something like that happens? When we say, "Oh my gosh, like there's no way in the world that's the person I didn't."
I'll tell you how you don't act. You don't go out and you commit an assassination.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't do something as heinous as that. You don't take someone's life over that. So,
but now what? Now wait a minute. Now,
yeah.
See, what if it gets to a point though? What if it gets to a point where a revolution is needed? You know what I mean? That's the thing. Like if in see, it's hard to keep referencing Germany, Nazis, and Hitler is because you have to understand the Germans were the ones that put Hitler in power. He would go in front of the people and he'd give his speeches, and everybody was cheering him. I mean, everybody was cheering him. It's not like there wasn't a person that was like, this doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Like pretty much the entire German nation was like on board with what he was saying. You know what I mean? And they and they gave him the power. You know what I mean? They did it. You know what I mean? So it came from them as well.
Man, that goes into human nature. I mean, but oh man, that
Yeah, following the crowd.
It does. It's reminiscent of when they crucified Christ, or when they basically chose Barabbas over Jesus to be freed, right? I mean, when the crowds are basically there's people in the crowd trying to stir them up, is what the Bible talks about.
Yeah.
And they ended up releasing Barabbas, but also about the human nature. If you think about Germany, like Germany in World War I, they were anyway, in World War I, after World War I, they were in high debt, right? Because of the way that the other nations came.
They had gotten screwed over from World War I. Essentially, they had a bad time.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of led to Hitler's rule, was the fact that basically Hitler was like, "Hey, we got our butts kicked, and we got the worst deal of the century on this." On the peace deal when they lost.
And we're the ones that are supposed to pay back everything.
Yeah.
And rightly or wrongly so. I'm just saying that was the circumstances that happened. Now, if you think about it, there were, as a matter of fact, certain individuals that basically totally opposed Hitler because of the fact they understood he was trying to, the way that he was stirring people up, he was talking about these people over here are the evil ones that caused it, right? And he pointed a lot to the Jews, right? He did. And so he was a racist, right?
Yeah.
And he used that in the circumstances that were there in the country at the time. But should people have said, "Hey, wait a second, absolutely not"?
It kind of reminds me of what you had said on the previous episode, where you're talking about being in a situation, and the situation should have been stopped several steps up ahead. You know what I mean? And it just kept going, and it kept getting further along in the thing.
Yeah. So let me just read Acts, because this is Peter again. Remember, he wrote about obeying authority, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, but the high priest. Actually, I think this is probably the whole context. But the high priest rose up, and all who were with him, that is the party of the Sadducees. Now, the party of the Sadducees, we know who they are, right? And filled with jealousy. They were the smaller of the Jewish sect. The Pharisees were a lot larger. They arrested the apostles and put them in the public prison. I wonder how that actually, how did they even have power to put them in prison? So remember, there was and anyway, I don't want to. There was a time in John where basically they said, "Hey, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. We need to kill him." And they said, and the reason we want to kill him is because more people are starting to follow Jesus, and if we don't kill Jesus, we're going to lose our place and our nation, right? Mm-hmm. So even though they were under Roman law, it's just mind-boggling to me. I go back to that. They were under Roman rule. I'm sorry, the Jews were at the time. They still had some people that actually had their own kind of place, their political place, and they didn't want to lose that power at the time to be able to tell people what to do and to get money from those people as well, right? Yeah. It was kind of that suppression that you're talking about and freedom, but it was interesting that is, of all the things that they accused Jesus of, right? They accused him of blasphemy because he said he a mere man claimed to be God, right? Which was what he did. But really, it's because they didn't want to. They wanted to keep their place and their position is what they wanted to do, right? But that's really not even what I'm here for. Let me read this. I got on a tangent. They arrested the apostles and put them in public prison. But during the night, an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, "Go and stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life." And when they heard this, they entered the temple at daybreak and began to teach. Now, when the high priest came and those who were with him, they called together the council and all the senate of the people of Israel and sent them to the prison to have them brought. But when the officers came, hold on, let me see. When the officers came, they did not find them in the prison, so they returned and reported. Oh my gosh, I may have gone back too far. Hold on a sec. Okay. I'm sorry. Here, let me get
So
get to the point. We strictly charge you not to teach in this name. Now we're talking about the name of Jesus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yet here you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and you intended to bring this man's blood upon us. They killed Jesus, and they're saying, You're making us guilty.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, you're already guilty. I don't need to make you guilty. I don't need to make you nothing, right? You killed the guy. But Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than man. So the context of that is preaching Jesus. But I've heard Christians use it. We need to obey, God rather than man. Just be careful. All I'm saying is that in the biblical sense, be careful of how you're using that verse. That's all I'm saying. Right?
That's really interesting. Yeah, because so my argument would be that God intends us to be free in the sense the way that the animals are free. You know what I mean? This goes back to, I look out at nature and I look at animals. Animals don't make other animals work for them. You know what I mean? They either work in synergy or they work on their own. You work in your pact with yours, and then you're allowed to roam and do what you want and be free, and it's up to you to get your food and get your stuff. And to me, right, when you talk about Eden, going back to the Garden of Eden, that's the only way I can picture it. You know what I mean? Is basically you get to a point where you're ultimately free, where it's.
Yes, ultimately. But what do you mean God intended for? You said God intended for us to be free. Is that what you said? I think. Ultimately, yeah, absolutely. But here on earth, is that a truism? You're saying that. I don't know if that's a truism.
Because you brought up a few passages, and I had looked up a few passages yesterday as well. And a lot of them do talk about freedom. There's a lot of passages that talk about freedom. It's always in that context, though. If you're paying attention, and every single time I said, well, I know what Dad's going to say. Dad's going to say that context in that one is very specifically talking about the freedom we have in Christ, not the freedom to do what we want, in the world, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah, we love our freedom. We love our God, and I would say God-given freedom to do what we want on our land, grow the crops, buy, go and pick and choose, what kind of meat we want at the market. But we have, or we go and we say, hey, basically, it's time to buy a car. I can pick and choose my car. I can pick and choose my house. Yeah. All those are things of freedom. And then we hope, right? And I think most people have this thing, right, that we hope that that we can live in that same freedom where basically, how do I put it, that we're not that no one's infringing upon that God, what we say is a God-given freedom, but maybe it's an American freedom more than anything. I don't know if it's a God-given thing. I think God-given as eternal beings, but here on earth it might be a little bit different. It might be a little bit nuanced, right?
This goes back to you had just taken a call from your sister not too long ago, just a few minutes ago actually. Where she was saying, when you read the Constitution, the founding fathers are praying to God, and they are writing God into the Constitution, and they say that these things came from God. Like this idea came from God. It's because we're all made in God's image, so we all have something sacred, and we're all equal in that sense, right? We may not be equal in our abilities, but we all are equal in spirit, and so therefore, that's where this God-given freedom comes from.
So, is it okay if I read some of the verses though, and then maybe you can comment on these, or we can maybe discuss those? I have a bunch. Well, actually, that was Well, I pulled them up. Those actually just came up kind of impromptu right now.
Okay.
But I did pull some up previous to this when you said, hey. On Monday, I think it was Monday, you said, hey, let's talk about freedom. It's important. And I see that you're wearing a dog with a
I got this from mom. Mom bought me this one. She actually bought it.
That dog is free, man. Free to have that,
Yeah.
that bandana on his head and hopefully listen to some good 70s rock and roll. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, it's really interesting. Okay, like I said, basically any verse that you're going to bring up is I'm just going to say it's that it relates to our heavenly freedom, our freedom in Christ. I will give another one though here, another biblical example, which I didn't read too far into, and maybe you know a little bit more about it though. When the Israelites are there in the desert for 40 years, they're about ready to cross the river to go in the across the Jordan, right? And they're about to be led by Joshua, right? Moses gives in the Bible, he gives them a little bit about, hey, this is how you should set up your nation when you guys go there and you guys form your nation. He gives them a little bit there. Do you know anything about that? Isn't there some implications that they should be free? Is there?
Yeah, I probably don't have too much context there, honestly,
okay.
to really speak on it. What is it? What's interesting about that is that Moses couldn't even go into the promised land. You know what I mean? God, the implication is basically he disobeyed God in a certain way, and therefore God was going to have Joshua bring him into the promised land, right? But it's interesting that Moses may the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you. There's a couple other verses, in there, but that's a great kind of like, if you want to encapsulate a speech, your last speech to someone, that's a great one. But no, I can't really comment on that. But let me read some just so we can maybe talk about maybe the context of what freedom is biblically, right? Okay. I'm going to just talk about a few, read a few, and then maybe we can comment after a bit, okay? So it says, now and we'll talk. So now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Okay, there's one of them, right? Yeah. And then it was and then there's another one in Galatians, right? And it says, yet because the false brother secretly brought in those who our freedom that we have in Christ Jesus, so they might bring us back into slavery. For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm therefore, and do not submit your again to the yoke of slavery. So it's interesting that this one is in Galatians, and I talked about Galatians. Galatians is a scathing. People talk about Corinthians and how Corinthians is kind of a scathing rebuke against the church. It is. But it's in a different context. It's really basically the behavior of the people in the church and how, the institution of the new church needed to be set up. And these guys were doing some absolutely crazy things, how they were taking the Lord's Supper, how, people were sleeping with other people, how they were actually coming to the table hungry and getting drunk. I mean, it was a crazy church at the time, right? But Galatians, it's a shorter book, very, very short book. There's 1st and 2nd Corinthians, by the way, several chapters, but Galatians is a very short book, and it's a scathing rebuke against, it's against adding anything to the gospel. So when, we talked about that. So the freedom that we have in Christ is when, so back to the law and gospel thing. The law is you do this and live. The gospel is it's already done. So you cannot do it and live. That's really kind of the whole lesson of the whole thing of anything that's law. Gospel is it's done. It's done. It's done for you. But if we talk about Galatians says these people were adding to the gospel. They were saying, hey, you can believe in Jesus, but then you got to be circumcised, right? You can believe in Jesus, but you have to hold to these ceremonies, right? Yeah. Anything that you add is taking that freedom away and putting you back in bondage, right? So the Bible talks about bondage in a different way. It's you know how it is. I mean, and let me go into other passages in a bit, but it's more of the spiritual slavery, really. Yeah, you're in. That's what I was saying. Yeah, you're in. So we want to talk about, hey, I want to be able to, plant my crops and do these other things. That is a certain type of freedom, but the freedom in Christ is basically that we're not in bondage to sin. Yeah. Right. And then if we think that we can earn our salvation, that is sin. It is saying that basically Christ has not done enough to earn your salvation, and you got to do something extra.
Yeah.
Read Galatians. It's a great book that basically Paul starts out and basically almost like the third verse and just starts.
Now it's interesting. You talk about that. You talk about that verse, not adding to the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now, I think
not adding to the Bible. What do you mean?
Well, that's exactly what I was about to explain.
Yeah,
is really that saying not adding to the gospel, not changing the message, not adding that way. I do think the Bible should. I think new books should be on the back of the Bible, and maybe you could separate them. I think World War II should be in there. I think World War II should be in the Bible. I think it should be a part of the Bible. I think people should put it in there and just write it from a historical aspect, right? The way that some of the Old Testament books were written, where it's just a historical thing. Like, you don't have to add in to anything else, but it is important because Israel at the end is reformed. You know what I mean? And that's pretty important. You know what I mean? These are important things, and going forward in history, 300, 400 years from now, it might need to be in there. You know what I mean? For the people of the time, you know what I mean?
It depends. It depends how you interpret eschatology, though, too. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, we could say, so whose World War II book are you going to use? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know
for sure. I understand the problems with something like that. I absolutely understand the problems with like trying to figure out exactly how to write it or add it or into the back. It would be a huge problem. Don't get me wrong, for sure. But it's definitely one of those things, though, that I feel like somehow should be worked in there. Someone should find a way. Someone needs to find a way to have that in there. It's kind of my feeling on it. Now, you know what? If it doesn't happen, whatever. I'm just saying. It seems like it would be a good idea.
I like the 66 books in the Bible as they are right now. Right,
and unless you were a Catholic, and then you'd like the 73 books that were in the Bible.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
We had already talked.
But one of them is not about World War I or II.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, anyways.
No, but I mean, that whole thing is pretty interesting about the end of World War II, and then basically, this is just the British actually vacating that area over there and giving it over to the Jews, and then saying basically, okay, 1948, you're a nation now, and basically they had to. Use stones and slings at the time to fight their enemies. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? They really weren't given any resources per se to fight the enemy that were going to come against them. But on the
the Jewish people were scattered. I mean, they were all over the place. Some lived in Russia, some lived in Europe, some lived in America. Yeah. They were all over the place, you know what I mean? And it's not that there still aren't Jewish people living all over the place, but now they have a home to go back to, and then or at least that's what a lot of them believed when they went back.
Aren't they the only one that basically are a race and a religion? The only people that are race and a religion?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
if they're Jewish by religion, then they're both, right?
I mean, Native Americans, I guess. Native Americans, but see, I mean, when you contextualize Native American religion, man, I'm telling you, depending on which mythology you're listening to, I mean, some of it sounds like some like early Christian ideas. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's so weird. They're one of the only ancient people that believe in a monotheism. Like it's a very odd thing. You know what I mean? Most other people end up at some point in time basically being polytheistic, right? I mean, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Greeks, the Norse, and whatever, however you say that, Norse mythology. I mean, Japanese, Chinese, they're all polytheistic. The only other one that's monotheistic that I know of, like from the get-go, is Native Americans.
How about Islam?
Well, but Islam is an Abrahamic religion, so it follows the Abrahamic religion.
Gotcha. So. Okay. So Man, these are good discussions, but we if you've been with us before, it's hard to keep us on track, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some things are good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like you said. There also the problem is there's just some things that we just agree on that, you know what I mean. It's like I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
back to so this is actually let me go in the freedom.
Okay.
I'll be on a tangent if I head down that path. Okay, but let me see about I'm sorry about other passages. So again, usually the context is about you're a slave to sin. Do you want to be a slave to sin, or do you want to be, in effect, it's really, a slave to Christ, right?
Yeah.
And him and his righteousness and what he's done. So it actually does talk about being a slave, but who do you want to be a slave to? You know what I mean? Now, in the old times, we understand what a slave was at the time. It was a person who was paying off their debt, right? That was most of the time.
That's a good point.
That was what a slave was back then. Where when we think about slave in our modern time, it's a totally different mindset, right?
Here in America, the word slave is not appropriately used. You can't take the word slave, what we mean in America, and apply it to this biblical slave. A biblical slave is totally different than an American slave pre-Civil War. Mm-hmm. That's a completely different type of slavery. The biblical version of a slave is more like a contract that someone intentionally signs, and they give themselves away so that way they can earn money, and then they are free after a certain amount of time. It doesn't work like you're born and you're a slave, and then you're a slave throughout your whole of your life, and you're owned by somebody. In Egypt, when they're slaves, the Israelites are slaves but they don't have a owner. Mm-hmm. Their owner is the government. Mm-hmm. It is the entirety of Egypt that owns the slaves of Goshen, of the Israelites. Yeah. They own them. And so they go out and they work. They have taskmasters that put them out, but the taskmasters don't own these slaves. They are just the managers of their day-to-day work. So it's a completely different thing when you have you get to America and you have these slaves that are people owned by other people, specifically, like individuals owned by individuals.
Crazy that we even went down that path. You know what I mean? So pretty bad stuff. Here's another thing about freedom. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, and they really didn't believe. You'll hear that in a bit. If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth. And what will set you free? And the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham. This kind of thing, it kind of mirrors a little bit about Galatians, if you think about it. We are offspring of Abraham, and we have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say we will become free? Like you're saying that we're slaves. Well, their slavery was the fact that they still thought their lineage, right, would get them salvation.
Yeah.
When in fact their lineage did nothing for them. In fact, a great Bible passage is in Luke, when Jesus was brought to the temple, mm-hmm. and Simeon actually prophesied over him and said, Simeon actually prophesied over Jesus, who was a Jew. The parents were Jewish. Simeon was a Jew, and the other lady who was a prophetess at the temple as well. But anyway, Simeon said he will be a light to the Gentiles. Think about that. You know what I mean? Think about that. And they thought that the lineage of Abraham, they were Jewish, was the way that they were going to get there. Now, there were a couple other things that they mixed in there as well. But anyway. Yeah. So think about that. How you're saying that we're not free, but he said, truly I say to everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. And this is good because you know what we're talking about, but it's good for the listeners to understand what the Bible says about slavery, about being free, and the fact that we're talking about sin is your slave, freedom in Christ because we're free from sin because we believe in him, right? So the slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my words have no place, blah, blah, blah. So, not blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so that's really where the conversation ends. That's the same chapter, by the way, where he says, before Abraham was, what does he say? I am.
Yeah.
I created Abraham. I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Besides all the other things that it talks about. So
yeah, it's so crazy. Like as you say these things, you know what I mean? Like so much of it. You know, I think back to Charlie Kirk. There's a ton of stuff that mirror exactly what he says. You know what I mean? I mean that's what he believed right there, you know, like, he believed a lot of that same stuff. I don't know. It seems to me like, the ideas of freedom, have their birthplace in the Bible. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
How long have we been talking, by the way?
48 minutes. So altogether an hour and hour and 20.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
we can wrap it up here. We can wrap it up here soon.
No, I don't know. I mean, we've been blabbing for a long time. I mean, hopefully people don't take this as blabbing. I think that we have some, hopefully insightful things that we talked about here today. But I think back to what I said before, and it's really kind of this thing that as Christians, so as Christians, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we live in a free country, but there's a bunch of other countries out there that aren't free. But we have a truth, we have a Bible that transcends cultures, right?
Yeah.
How do we? So I know that there's.
Well, so ultimately, that idea of freedom transcends cultures as well.
Yeah. So exactly. So how do we take our freedom in Christ and say, hey, if for those Christians who are in North Korea, for those Christians who are in an underground church in China, I'm sorry, or basically in the Sudanese culture, right? Who there's a lot of oppression of Christians as well.
Yeah.
It's really how do those Christians, if we were over there, I guess is maybe the question. If we were able to instruct them on what we're talking about today, how do we talk to them about what the Bible says about freedom? Hey, is it really as straightforward as, and maybe it is. You answer the question. Is it you don't want to be enslaved to sin, you want to be enslaved to Christ? I mean, maybe it's something like that. I don't know.
Well, you had brought up that verse early on about basically being good and living a good life as an example for the ignorant. You know what I mean? So that's exactly what the idea of freedom of speech is,
How do you
and what Charlie Kirk believed and what he said is he says the reason I'm here discussing things with you guys is because if I don't come here and I don't discuss things with you guys, then that will lead to worse things. It'll lead to violence. It'll lead to an erosion of freedom and exercise your ability. Your freedom of speech must be exercised, or it will be taken away with.
Yeah. What is the freedom of speech like biblically? It's kind of what I guess I'm still trying to kind of still figure out a little bit, right? But we know that it's preaching Christ, right? If it's other things, it might just be secondary things.
And just preaching the truth. Truth as well. Because one of the Charlie Kirk pushed up against a lot of ideas, which aren't anywhere really addressed in the Bible. You know what I mean? I mean, you can infer that they are, but there's no direct thing. There's nothing directly in the Bible that says, transgenderism is wrong. You know what I mean? It's like I assume back then it was just evident that that's absolutely crazy weird. You know what I mean? And is crazy wrong. You know what I mean? Whereas nowadays, the idea has spread so deep into the culture and everything that you have to actively fight back against it. You know what I mean? Which is crazy. So
yeah, I mean,
and so that's a truth. He believed it was the truth. You know what I mean? And so that's what he spoke up for. And and so yeah, and they might kill you for it. Same thing. You asked him about China. You asked him if you're in China, and you don't really have the freedom. It's your duty. It's your obligation. As a person that believes, in good and righteousness and freedom, it's your duty to speak up, even if they kill you.
So what about so back to
that's what happened to Jesus?
Well, what about back to where Peter talks about obeying government authorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then he says, do it. You're gonna, what does he say? You're gonna put them to shame. I can't remember. What does he say? You know what I mean? What does he say? So
you said sin is a mirror, right?
No. That's what.
Well, no.
James. I'm sorry, Peter. James said that.
Yeah, but it goes back into what you're saying, right? You sit there. So when you speak the truth, and then they in their sinful nature, eventually that is going to be reflected back on. You sit there. Actually, you know what? I never brought this up after you had mentioned the mirror thing.
Yeah.
So one of my deeper thoughts that I haven't expressed to you yet, and I was talking about going to heaven and hell and everything like that. In the afterlife, they talk about like this judgment by God, right? And how is God gonna judge you? Well, the only way to make it fair for everybody would be basically a mirror. It would be you judging yourself, right? And it would be the mirror being held up to you. Yeah, that's exactly like you're saying. Sin is a mirror, right? So it holds it up to you, and it forces you to look at yourself and to look at your sinful nature and the things that you've done that are sinful.
Well, hopefully I didn't say sin is a mirror. Hopefully the reflection of looking in the mirror at the fact of who you are is really kind of the implication, right? So
yeah. I mean, I hope you got that. I understood that. Yeah. Obviously it's an analogy, right? It's not a literal thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying the mirror itself is sin. Yes, but it is that reflection that you see it, and that's where you look at yourself. You look at yourself, and you look at that mirror image, and then you can rightfully see.
We can rightfully see, but it actually says in that passage that basically some people just kind of dismiss it. You know what I mean?
Well, I think I think what happens.
So
at
if we're forced,
I think at the end when you have when you're no longer in this body and you're on the other side, I think when you see it, it's you won't be able to ignore it. You won't be able to dismiss it. It's going to be right there in your face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you may not have any other option. I'm not sure. You may be right on that. I'm not sure. But now I forgot where I was talking about in Peter. But if we do what Peter says, though, I guess here's my question, and maybe it's I don't know if we end here or maybe you have any other commentary. But if we do what Peter says and we obey authority, that is actually instituted by God, and that authority actually turns against us. How do we think about this? And maybe it's just a thought that I just want to throw out there and we talk about it next time. But that authority that we are supposed to honor and submit to, and that authority turns against you, how do we handle that? Right? As Christians, biblically, how are we supposed to handle that? I'm not saying that that's an easy answer. But I am saying that. But it is something that, that we have to come to grips with, and we do it ahead of time. We do these things ahead of time in our mind. So we say, okay, if this comes up, let's, so you're situated for that. Do you have an answer for that, or do you want to talk about it next time?
You speak the truth. You continue to speak the truth. You speak the truth, and that is it. And if you believe that Jesus Christ is the truth, there you go. Then you speak that.
What if that's not the context though of the of the thing? So, and
Like-
maybe we can get into it next time, because I do think you wanted to talk about maybe your police work. You know what I mean? But what happens when the police? You used the example last time where basically it's trespassing if you actually put a foot in the door, but the police officer is told to put the foot in the door, because basically if they slam the door on the foot, you can actually charge them for assaulting a police officer.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
So
how do
it's a very twisted, corrupt part of the whole system. You know what I mean? There's a ton of them. That's a very, very small example that I have of things that I have seen. I told you about the situation with the mayor, where the mayor wanted us specifically to go out to a very certain street and write tickets to very certain people in order to, exercise his authority.
And this is a tough one to swallow. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the right answer is, but on that ticket thing, is do you go in and pay your ticket and then go argue your case? I don't know. Or do you just not pay your ticket? I don't know. When the police officer comes and they put the foot in the door, maybe you just don't slam their foot. You know what I mean? And how do you do it biblically and respect that authority?
Oh, Jesus!
And are you like, if that officer is aggressive, maybe it's up to you as a Christian to kind of like bring the situation down a bit. The level.
Yeah, that's not your job. That's his job.
No, why?
Even though he doesn't,
it's everyone's job. It's everyone's job.
No. But it's literally his job. It's literally his job is to de-escalate. That is a part of his SOP. That is a part of his job description. That is
so now I've got you talking.
Why he's got? Yeah, I know why he's got it. So when they don't do it, it's egregious.
But what about just a human being?
It's an exercise of authority in the most evil sense of which they're trying. And so this is what I would say. Once you realize that the situation is going like that, as you look out and you see what police officers are nowadays, you either have to, if you do decide to become a police officer, you have to go in there knowing that they might ask you to do things that you aren't supposed to do, and then do not do them. Okay. If you're a Christian and you come upon you should be aware, and you should think about, that was one of the problems I had as a police officer, is I really hadn't contemplated some of the things that I was told to do or not to do and everything. In hindsight, looking back on them, I'd tell the mayor to go stick it up his butt. You know what I mean? I'm serious. Nowadays, that's exactly what I'd tell him. I'd say, no effing way, dude. No effing way. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if they fire me, they fire me. That
was kind of the small town attitude that you worked for, I think, at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny.
But do the question is, how we talked about last time, where basically sometimes when you have a situation that looks really bad, and you're in the middle of it, but basically it might have been something that started a year ago, which got you in that situation. Yeah, right. Yeah. We talked a little bit about that.
Well, this is exactly the same thing, and you had that's exactly what I was going to say. It's the situation nowadays. If a police officer were to come to my house and were to tell me to open the door, I wouldn't open the door. You know what I mean? I'd tell them from my window, I'd say, get off my property. Unless you got a warrant. You got a warrant, you can kick in my door, because that's illegal.
Well, why would a police officer come to your door then?
I mean, if they were to.
If they just came.
I'm just saying, for any reason whatsoever.
Any reason?
Yeah, any reason whatsoever. I'd tell them, get off my property. Yeah. Give me a phone call or something like that. Get off my property. I don't want you on my property for no reason whatsoever. I don't even care. I don't care what it is. Unless I called you, unless I called 911, then you can come. You know what I mean? Because I have invited you.
What if they're trying to warn you of a serial killer that's in your area?
You guys can send a message to my phone. You guys can call me. You guys can put a letter in my mailbox. You can do anything except come on my property. Do not come on my property. So this, like you're saying, because I don't want even be down that situation that comes up later. You know what I mean? This is what we were talking about, right? If I open the door, there's a chance he puts his foot in my door. If there, so I don't want to even get to that point. I guess I look at that situation and say, what did you do
that cause them to do that, rather than because
yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because your freedom is that you have the right, to your privacy. You have the right to your home.
That's an American freedom. It's not a Christian freedom. It's a different thing.
That's why you exercise. You have to exercise these freedoms, or they will be taken away from you. And that's exactly what's happening.
I think you're in conflict with two different freedoms right there. That you got to figure out which one usurps the other.
We're talking about a tyrannical government. You don't let the tyrannical government have like any foothold at all.
I don't know what did I read something there about?
No.
I'm sorry.
Your question was specifically okay. So let's go back to what your question was. Your question was specifically about when that government turns against you, turns against your stuff, against how things are supposed to be, or how things were. Yeah, what do? You fight. Yeah, you tell them to F off. You know what I mean? That's what you do. And you continue to do what you do.
Okay, that's his advice. It's not my advice at all. But I think I guess I was using specific examples. Right? Remember when Peter wrote that, they had a tyrannical government back then. They had to deal with that.
Now, there's a difference between, so the government legally has a reason to come on your property. Like I said, if they have, say they have exigent circumstances, maybe there is a shooting going on or something, or maybe there is something dangerous happening, or maybe there's something that I'm doing where I am breaking the law. If they can come on your property, then they're going to just do it. That's why I said if they have a warrant, right, then they can legally just knock down your door anyways. So they should. That's their responsibility to go and do it properly, to do their job properly.
Yeah.
What we're talking about though, then when you're talking about a person a police officer putting his foot in your door, that's illegal. By his laws, that's
but
illegal.
You said but even before that, you said basically if they came in property and knocked on the door, you would tell them to get off.
Yeah, because they're not allowed to do that.
And with swear words. Last time I had a police officer knock on my door, you know what it was for?
What?
A lost kid.
A
lost kid.
Okay.
Absolutely, I need to help him. I need to help him, and I need to help the parents find the lost him. Help.
He can tell me that
him.
through the door. I don't have to open the door for that. He can tell me that through the door, then I can decide if I'm going to come out or not. Yeah, that's what
Then you can decide. No, that's not what you said that you would do, though.
But yeah, that's my property and my prerogative to do with my property what I want to do with my property.
Well, then you're not. I would argue that you're not behaving as a good Christian when you're doing that. I think it's a very easy argument to make. You're exercising. So again, I think I would be careful. Like we got American freedom, and then we have freedom in the biblical freedom, right?
I've seen videos of what of the exact scenario that you're talking about, and I've seen where it's gotten people killed.
I'm still alive, so I'm fine with it. And then I would do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine until it happens to you, and then you're left with a wife that's a widower, right? Whatever. Yeah, you're left with a wife that's a widow that has to be taken care of. But
I, as a human being, now maybe it's his job and his training to de-escalate the situation. Maybe they don't do a good job of that in a lot of circumstances.
Or maybe they intentionally go against it.
But it could be. But it's my job just as a human being to de-escalate the situation. You know what I mean? To just make sure that that I don't escalate anything beyond what it needs to be. And maybe part of it is on me too, as a Christian. And the thing is, if I have a cop that knocks on my door again, I'm not going to be belligerent. I know I'm not going
to. I don't know. It's not. I don't know if it is your job to de-escalate as a civilian,
as a human being, as a Christian person. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes it's fun to to fight with people. You know
Well,
what I mean?
sin is fun. I mean, I'm not going to argue that.
It doesn't have to be. I mean,
Maybe for a short time, until you get handcuffed and
if two people are in consent,
and someone putting a foot on your neck. But that's because maybe you did something that you shouldn't have done.
No, see, that is a horrible thing that you just said right there, because that's their excuse. That's the excuse is if you just would have listened to the officer, you'd be fine. But no, the officer broke your neck. He threw you on the ground. He broke your neck. He busted down your door, your property.
We're heading down a weird path.
He broke his own laws. Yeah, that's the problem with it. Is you sit there, if you let them.
I'm at peace with my freedom that I have in Christ. I'm at peace with my freedom that I have here in the nation. I am, right?
Yeah, but you don't.
And I'm not. And I don't. I bet by the time I die, I don't have an aggressive police officer, because it's just not going to happen. I'll bet money on that.
It's a bad bet. It's a bad bet, because all you're doing, your bet isn't based on any sort of logic or math or anything like that.
It's based on
actual situations.
Yes, it is.
Up.
Yeah, it is. It's based on anecdotal evidence that police officer
that you've gotten lucky.
No, okay, I might have that. Well, basically no, because I know how. I just know how, when authority comes, basically not to fire them up for some stupid reason, just because I want my freedom.
No, but even if you don't, that's the problem. If you don't fire them up, they still break your neck. They still throw you on the ground.
Oh boy,
even if you sit there and I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah, that's what all of them do. Yeah, exactly.
You don't really. Yeah, hold on. I'm okay. Telling you don't realize.
I've been pulled over before, right?
And I have too.
Okay, I've been pulled over at least four times in the last few years. Okay. Right. Absolutely. One time I did get a ticket, but basically it was because I was speeding, and he was totally polite to me. I was pulled over another time. Basically, he let me go because he understood the circumstances. I was pulled over 2 other times, and this is really stupidity on my part, but I didn't have the registration tag on my vehicle. and one of those times, it was a cold day, and the police officer, and I found it in my glove compartment, and the police officer said, "Hey, I can put it on for you." I said, "Hey, that'd be great."
Yeah.
And he was outside, and he had a beanie on. I didn't have a beanie in my car, and he put the registration tag on my car and let me go, right? And then the other time where a police officer came to my door, he didn't put his foot in the door. I opened the door for him because I knew he's a police officer. I looked through the peephole, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't yell at him. I didn't escalate the situation, and he was actually actively looking for the parents of a kid who actually wandered outside of their house past midnight.
Okay.
And absolutely so.
My response is you're very lucky, and you've been blessed, and good for you.
I think you need to reconsider your position. That's all I'm going to say. Highly reconsider it.
About what though?
About your anger at authority and not being able to do biblically what the Bible tells you to do.
But where in the Bible does it tell me that I have to break their laws that they themselves are breaking, or be okay with them breaking their own laws? So
that's not what it says.
Exactly. It's not what it says. So what does it say?
It doesn't talk about whether they're doing something bad against you or good against you at all. Remember, so back
their own laws.
No, back to my point, right? So back then, remember what happened to Peter?
What?
He was put to death.
Okay.
He was put to death.
Yeah.
The Bible, Paul was put to death. Those two people actually still said follow the government because they're instituted from God for a reason, right? They were put to death, if you think about it.
I can follow the government. I can follow the laws. Yeah. I can have my book out, and I can follow every single rule in there. That doesn't mean that there isn't a road cop that's going to
law. It does not say you're using that term. You're using that term blankly. That it does not. The Bible doesn't say follow the law. It's talking about just respecting an authority that's there. And
what authority? So if
hold on.
The principal of your grandson's high school comes up to you and says, "Stop! I'm gonna open up your car and search through your car." You're gonna let him?
I didn't. No, I don't.
He's an authority figure. He's a part of the government. He's getting paid by the government, and he like, what are you talking about?
I'm not going to swear at him. Even if I may have a grievance against that person, I may have questions, and I may say, hey, wait a sec, you gotta prove that you have the right to do that. I may do that. That's not a problem. But hold on.
What if he says I don't need to give you proof, and then he just does it anyways?
Hold on. I'm just saying that I am not going to. There's no reason to be belligerent. There's no reason to swear, and there's no reason to basically put up a wall instantaneously, like you were actually showing examples of that. Putting a wall up against because you don't like the authority that person's given, and you don't have a clue who that person is.
But that person doesn't have that authority. That's what I'm saying.
They do by God. They're instituted by God, whether you agree with what they're doing or not.
Anybody that just comes up to you off the side of the street and tells you that they have the authority of God can say that, or, oh, hey, I have the authority of the government. I have the authority of this person or that person or whatever. Mm-hmm. So Asa Hutchinson, right, the governor of Arkansas, told me to come up to you and told me to confiscate your car. Get out of your car right now. You're going to do it?
I don't know if I'm going to do it. I'm not. But
no. You absolutely.
He's not. You know what? You're going to say that these are common examples, but I would say that I have not been there, and I'm not going to be there by the end of my life. It's not going to happen. Okay, it's not going to happen. And maybe I'm blessed, and maybe I'm an anomaly. But guess what? I'm going to, as best I can, say what does the Bible tell me? Now it doesn't. Remember what it doesn't say, because you've used this, right? You've used this, and we have to be careful here. It doesn't say, hey, if they're following the law, you need to listen to them. That's not what the Bible says. It doesn't even say that. It just says you need to respect authority. You need to respect authority, and you need to respect authority. No, hold on.
The authority is the law. It's the judges. It's the law book, because that's over the police officers. Because when these police officers do bad things, they get indicted, and they are now holden to that, and they end up going to prison, or they end up getting fired or sued or so on and so forth, right? The point is, we talked about those step-by-step things, right? Mm-hmm. The point is you stop it before it even happens. You don't let it get to a point where all of a sudden somebody's going to be violating your right, and they'd be like, oh, well, afterwards I get $1 million because you violated my right.
No, in
a lot of cases, most people end up dead before they even have a chance to do that.
Okay.
And then it's left up to their widow to go ahead and sue that cop, or get that cop fired and get that cop sent to jail.
And guess what? That's egregious. That is egregious.
Yeah,
You're right.
exactly.
You're right.
And I'm going to stop that from happening, because I care more about my family and protecting my family and taking care of my family than I do respecting the authority of some rogue cop that comes over to my house and is breaking his own laws and breaking the laws of the country.
But you're assuming that they're a rogue cop right away, right off the bat.
Oh yeah, if they're coming knocking on my door, that is absolutely my first assumption. Because if he wasn't, he has the right to break down my door. Because if they have a warrant, if they have a reason to actually be there, then they can do it, right? But then once again, even then, once they get that foothold, they are now going to the point where they're breaking their own laws, where they're breaking their own things, and they push it all the way to death. And I'm not willing to risk my life just to make, just to respect their authority, as you say it, because I don't think that's a part of it. I think there's something wrong there. There's either some wrong way that either we're interpreting the Bible with it when it comes to those type of situations of what we're talking about, respecting the authority. I'm not willing to risk my life for the lives of my child and my family, just to be nice. You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely am hearing you. Okay. I'm absolutely I'm vehemently disagreeing with you.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely 180 degrees dead wrong.
All right.
Dead wrong. So
So,
Do you have anything more? Because I think we're good here. I think you said your piece, and I think you're taking freedom to an extreme level that, I mean, I'm not sure if...
like I said, I'm not saying don't pay your taxes. I'm not saying don't follow the speeding laws. I'm not saying that when a cop pulls you over, pull over. Obviously, pull over.
Thank you for that. Thank you for
I'm
that.
saying follow all the laws. I'm not saying don't follow any of the laws. I'm saying exercise your freedoms that you do have. Because it is legal for you to keep your door shut, and it is legal for you to talk to the officer from the other side of the door. That's absolutely, or from the window. You can talk to him from the window. That is legal,
and that's
right?
and that's fine. And,
so I'm saying follow. I'm saying follow the law, but I'm saying no. Your the legal things that you can and cannot do, and exercise the ones that you can, because they are for your safety.
Well, I tell you what, I might not know every law in the book, but I'm gonna be polite to the person. I'm gonna make sure that I understand. I may not know my rights. I may not, and guess what? I'm not gonna learn all my rights, because that is not in my wheelhouse. That's not my forte, and that's not my interest right now to do it. Right? Okay. Obviously, it's your interest to do it. But sometimes we use those things in general in life. We say we're going to study this so we can actually have an opposition to whatever we're actually studying, rather than trying to understand it. Right? If the Bible says about authority, just think about it this way. I would just have clarity, right? Clarity, and this may not be easy because of all the things that you've been through, but have clarity on what the Bible says about obeying authority. That's all. Just have in what it says, in the context, in terms of government, in terms of
you have
stuff
to
like that.
You have to describe that authority.
I'm just saying. I'm just going to land. Just find out. I keep pointing to this in my notebook, the Bible over there. But my phone. Okay,
I got.
But anyway, what's the context of the Bible? What it's talking about, and we have to come to grips with it. Right, we have to come to grips with it. Obviously, you think it's in a different place, and I think it is.
But in what way though? Like I don't understand what you think authority is. Once again, is the principal at my kid's high school? What's his authority?
What do you mean? What is his authority?
He has some sort of authority, right? He's an authoritative figure.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Okay, so when if he asks, or if he does, not even if he asks you, if he comes up to you and just tells you, get out of the car, are you going to get out of the car?
The principal at the school?
Yeah.
The principal at the school.
The principal at the school. He's an authoritative figure. You're supposed to respect him.
Okay.
It seems wild. I'm purposely making an extreme case because I don't even know where your line is. I'm like, is your line way over here where the principal of the school is an authoritative figure, and so therefore you're gonna respect him in the way that you're gonna do what he says to do, even if it's completely against the law, even if it's risky to your life?
I've just never heard of a principal ever doing that.
It doesn't matter whether you've heard of it or not. We're setting a foundation for this line. We're setting a foundation for a line of where it is on the authority. Do you respect it and do what they tell you to do? Right? That's what we're setting up. In this case, I'm given a highly extreme answer that should it can be as unlikely as you think it is, but if it does happen, is it a yes or a no? And for me, it's an absolute. I give him the finger. Get the heck out. Get the heck away from my car. Don't touch it. Don't touch it, because at this point in time, I think something weird is going on, and my life might be at risk.
I think what you're talking. So in that example, in that absolute. How long were we talking, by the way?
A while now. Now we're going long.
in that. We probably need to close this up.
Yeah.
But in that absolute extreme example, if I know that they are a principal and they're asking me something absurd that I know that is not, I know they're asking me something absurd, then I may say, hey, this doesn't add up. What's going on? And I may ask the questions, what's going on, right? But I'm not going to give them the finger. Honestly, I don't see me doing that. That's not my. Not the way that I operate.
You're taking the whole give them the finger, and you're trying to.
I'm saying that there's still a way to de-escalate where I think that you do that you may like to escalate a situation faster than it doesn't even need to be escalated. But there's ways of
you need to tell
there's ways of de-escalation.
When a wolf comes to attack you in the woods, right? What do? You yell and scream and you make yourself big and you try to scare him away. That's exactly what you do.
A wolf is an animal.
Yeah. When people come up to you and people are trying to enforce their will over you, especially where it's not legal, it's like, how do you get them back? Well, you sometimes have to be firm. You have to put your foot down and you have to get loud. And you have to be like, no, get away from me. Back up now. Right? That's what we do. That's what we learned as cops. That's what we did. That's what cops do, right? Cops do. When you sit there, when you start approaching me and I'm telling you stop, right?
As a cop.
You get loud and you tell them no.
And
stop.
why as a cop do you do that?
For his own safety.
Because why?
For his own safety.
But
no other reason. It's not legal.
No, that's not,
it has nothing to do with their SOP. It has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with their own individual safety.
That's not what you told me a few months ago on that.
Oh, what'd I say?
You said it's for your safety because there's a certain amount of feet that they can actually jump and get.
That's what I'm saying. For your I'm saying as a cop, it's for our safety.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. As a civilian, you are entitled to the same right of safety. If someone is coming at you, they're saying something weird or something like that, you have the same right to tell them, no, go away or stay away from me. A cop is a person, when they come on your property, they're doing so illegally. They're not allowed to do that, right? They're doing so with a weapon that's loaded, right? Is this person dangerous? If anybody else did it, if a normal civilian comes on your property and has a gun on them, and is that not should your default not be, okay, this is a safety issue now?
Yeah,
I have to play this different.
Absolutely, if they're a civilian, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be the same if they're a police officer.
Okay, I think this conversation is going nowhere. I do. You know what I mean? I do. I think it's going.
I'm sorry.
Nowhere. You know. All right. It's weird. It's weird how you want to exercise if you consider that freedom. You know, a way of exercising freedom. Boy, there's a lot of a lot of blood pressure, high blood pressure, and a lot of angst in terms of how you exercise your freedom. Where I think you should be at peace exercising your freedom.
Look, and
remember what we talked about. There's biblical Christian freedom.
Yeah.
Enslaved to sin or not enslaved to sin. What's free and what's not.
Internally, yes, I'm fine with whatever happens. That's why I'm fine with telling them to F off. And if they break down my door, then that's what happens. You know, I'm fine with that. So internally, I am at peace. But externally, I care about my life and I care about my family's life and I care about my property and I don't want to see those things destroyed. And the common thing is that's what happens. The common thing is innocent people get their houses broken into, innocent people get shot, innocent people get killed by police officers. That is the standard. That's not the abnormal. That's the standard. I saw it all the time.
I can't argue with you on that, obviously, but it hasn't happened to me yet. So I can just say it's anecdotal. That's fine. It hasn't happened to me yet, and I've been treated fine by police officers who I've come across every single time. and I only gave you examples of recent years.
That is absolutely fine. Like I said, you've been lucky and you're blessed. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. I guess we have been talking way too long. Gravity. Yeah. I mean, the police thing is, I mean, like, let's not keep going down it, but I'll just explain, why it is so important to me is because I saw it firsthand and I saw how corrupt and dirty it is. For every one good cop I know 50 bad cops. I don't know actually more than one good cop. I only know one good cop in the world. And that's my best friend. You know what I mean?
I know who you're talking about.
He's my best friend. And every other cop from them, I saw them do illegal things. I saw them break laws. I saw them lie. I saw them do horrible things. And I'm not talking just from that one department. You know, obviously there are lots of departments around this area, and I was, you know, in contact and friends with a lot of them. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff I saw people do was just so egregious. I mean, I don't know if you know. I mean, like while I was a police officer, I witnessed 3 executions, you know, where people got killed that shouldn't have been killed. Three times. People that had problems, and those problems easily could have been taken care of another way, but people locally here decided to shoot them instead, and there was no reason, absolutely no reason.
Okay.
But anyways, that's my experience, and,
all right.
And I'm not willing to. Anyways, I don't want to go back into the argument part.
No, that's tough. That's tough to deal with. I get it.
That's what. Yeah.
I don't get it, but that's tough to deal with.
Yeah.
I will give you that. Absolutely, that's what I mean.
Wow. How did that end us so long? We were about to end like 30 minutes ago, and then we just kept going.
If Christ has set you free, you are free indeed. That's the most important thing right now.
Yes. No, absolutely. I don't know. Freedom is important. Exercise your freedoms. You know what I mean? If you do not exercise your freedoms, they will be taken away. I don't know. That's the one. That's my last word. So, anyways, all right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Sorry it was so.
Thanks for putting up with us. Okay.
No.
All right. Next time, it may be the same. I have no clue.
No.
All right.
No. Yeah, and
comment if you like this one. Really be careful there. Okay. Really be careful and be thoughtful. But hey, if you want to give it a like, that's fine as well.
No. Yeah, give us a like if you're still here at the end. Wow, thanks.
Yeah, and Zach and I aren't going to talk to each other until the next podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Anyways, thanks guys very much. Yeah, like, subscribe. This will be up on YouTube and Spotify today. So yeah, give us a follow, a subscribe, or something like that. You know, and I'll pump out a few more of those shorts. When I get a chance. And thanks, guys, very much. See you guys around.
I survived this one.